Admiral, radar shows that we have liberals approaching at 3 o'clock, and libertarians at 9 o'clock, and conservatives at 6 o'clock. They're coming from every angle, every viewpoint. Oh, it's Political Radar with your hosts, Rhonda and Elliot.
Hey, all you political junkies, welcome to Political Radar, the best 30 minutes of unscripted, uncensored political talk you will hear all day. This is episode 11, and we're going to raise the bar today. How are we doing that? We're doing that because we have a state representative in the studio with us. Hello.
How's it going?
It's going great. This is State Representative Eric Genrich, and he is here with us today to chat about, quite a few things.
Yeah, whatever you guys want to talk about.
Well, we got 8 million on the list, so I don't even know where to start.
Well, let's ask our guests. Where would you like to start today?
Gerrymandering.
Yeah, I mean, before we hit the air, there was some discussion of gerrymandering, the history of it, and where it came from, and the relevance to the state of Wisconsin. So I'd be happy to jump into that a little bit.
Okay, what's gerrymandering? You had a good definition.
Yeah,
for us.
well, I mean, this is sort of off the top of the head, but it's named after Eldridge Gerry, who apparently, had a district, a funny-looking district, a salamander-like looking district created for him for political purposes way back, post-colonial days, post-revolutionary days, and the name has stuck, and it has a long and sordid history, so nothing new necessarily. But with the rise of technology, honestly, folks have been able to be more precise in the way that they slice and dice districts.
And why would someone want to do that? Like, what is the whole purpose of gerrymandering, and why is it even happening? Yeah,
well, I mean, the short answer is that it enables politicians to choose their voters versus the other way around. Voters choosing the politicians that they'd like to represent them. So if you have control of both houses and the governor's office, which was the case after the 2010 elections for Republicans, they were able to draw the maps. In Wisconsin, it's really unprecedented. It hadn't happened in modern history in our state. So what had happened previous was you have, like, say, a Democratic Senate and a Republican House draw up the maps. Whoever the governor would sign it into law. Then there could be a challenge to it.
Sure. The
judges would step in and they would draw the maps. That had been the case, I think, for the last 40, 50 years. But like I said, after 2010, Republicans, had all of the legislative branch and the governor's office, so they drew the map. As a result, in the 2012 election, which was my first election, legislative Democrats, or Assembly Democrats rather, received 200,000 more votes than Republicans, but received 39 seats out of 99. So it's roughly a 60-40 breakdown. So obviously there's a big disconnect between, in my view, the wishes of the electorate as a whole in the state of Wisconsin and the representation in the legislature.
Well, and it seems like it'd be really easy to do in Wisconsin because we're so polarized. So there are very blue areas, very red areas. Brown County is one of the few purple areas.
Right.
So, I mean, to a certain extent, it's sort of unavoidable that you're going to have these concentrations regardless.
Yeah, no, that's true. And people are sorting themselves in more partisan ways than they have, I think, historically. So in urban areas, you have more Democrats. In rural areas, you have more Republicans. But it's been exacerbated by this process.
Do you have, off the top of your head, do you have kind of a clear-cut example of?
Yeah, I mean, I think my district is a good example of it, actually. Historically, Green Bay had an East Side district and a West Side district. And after this most recent reapportionment, the 90th district was sort of moved east, centered downtown, and has more Democrats packed into it than was previously the case.
That's good for you, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's to some extent, yeah, it is good for me, but I would argue that that kind of a system is not good for the constituents across the state.
So have Democrats actually ever taken that and done, have they ever taken and driven the bus of gerrymandering? Is it a Republican thing?
Well, in the state of Wisconsin, Democrats have never been in the position to gerrymander. That's not to say that they would not have had they had the power. Democrats out in Maryland, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, I think are sort of good examples or bad examples of similar behavior. But we haven't we haven't done that here in Wisconsin. And in my view, it makes sense to sort of create that nonpartisan process, which has been in place in Iowa since the 1980 reapportionment and has consistently produced competitive seats, which
So
I
is-
think is something that voters are looking for.
Are there any districts that you think that unless that changes, it will always be in Republican control?
Yeah, there are a good number of those, and the reverse is true. I mean, in Madison, you have districts that are 85% Democratic. I mean, mine is close, actually, to a swing district. Mary Burke received 53% of the vote when she ran for governor. So it's not one of the worst examples, certainly. But there are a good number of those on either side where it's 70%, 80%.
Sorry to cut you off. So is this the sort of thing that only the minority party even really ever brings up? It's sort of like term limits. Like, term limits is an excellent idea because I don't want Republicans to be in there so long.
Right.
So do you think, is there any hope of getting it fixed? You mentioned Iowa. Is there something on the table?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. I mean, so we've advanced legislative solutions to this. Given the fact that Republicans are in control, those are not likely to be adopted. But there was a really interesting court case that has just received oral arguments April 24th before federal courts here in Wisconsin. One of the few times this sort of argument has ever been heard because the judiciary has typically said this is politics. We're not interested in weighing into this debate. But some political scientists have advanced the idea that there's this idea of an efficiency gap, which is basically the difference between a competitive district and a non-competitive district. And this efficiency gap is larger in the state of Wisconsin than they've ever seen. And so they've tried to objectively measure this. They've advanced the standard for judges to use and say this is really out of bounds. So there's been some federal judges who have been impaneled. A 3-person panel has heard the oral arguments. They're expected to rule within the next couple of months. This then would be appealed, whatever happens on either side, appealed directly to the U.S. Supreme Court. And folks are expecting that will be heard within the next year or so.
So it's possible that there could be a change.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I mean, we are a very purple state, really. We're always if not the top, one of the top 3 most hotly contested states in presidential elections.
Right.
So
it's sort of a story of 2 cycles, right? In presidential election,
yes,
Democrats do much better. Off years, Republicans.
So I mean, I really kind of think both sides could agree that maybe we should fix that.
Right, and that's been our argument. As you said, it's kind of the position of the minority party, but those things change. When I talked to the governor about it, I think this was last session, what he had said is if we're going to do it, the sooner the better, because as you get closer to the next reapportionment, things are shifting, and then maybe Democrats think we're going to be able to control the process. And
kind of have to do it in the middle.
Yeah.
So the governor is he's thinking of that he may not support gerrymandering the way it is right now?
Well, I wouldn't go that far. But his response was if you're going to do it sooner.
If you're going to do it. And I'll veto it. But go ahead and try.
Right.
Okay. Next topic.
Yeah.
Legalization. Go.
Yeah. Well, I think actually it's not a bad segue, only because there's a similarity between, not in Iowa necessarily, but in a number of other states where they've been able to move forward with these independent commissions to redraw maps, sort of go around legislatures. That's been the case also with legalization.
How so?
And so I think legislative bodies tend to stand in the way of both independent commissions and also with legalization, simply because I think the perceived political costs are high to make this kind of decision. But for the average voter, they're able to sort of maybe more objectively look at the evidence and say, no, this is the way that we want to go with it. So I think, Minnesota moved forward with a very modest medical marijuana law. I believe Vermont maybe is looking at legalization through their legislature, but that would be the first one. Otherwise, it's been a ballot initiative in just about every other state.
What have you heard from, people like your, I guess, fellow representatives and these senators as in regards to what their problem is with it? Like people that aren't in support of it, what is their argument? I mean, we know what their argument is, like the citizens, but in the legislative body,
right.
What is...
I mean, I think
argument
they would say
against
that,
it.
that there's a social cost to drug abuse. And in their mind, those costs are higher than the benefits of legalization, of reducing, say, criminal justice costs associated.
It costs a lot of money. Children. Let's ban children.
Right. Right.
Preposterous. So, but legitimately, so they think there's a social cost. But I think it's pretty clear that that's very minor in not just other countries, but now we have other states as templates for how this can be done. And the tax revenue from Colorado has been off the charts.
Right.
So how do fiscally responsible Republicans actually justify that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a good person to speak for them. I try not to honestly do that a whole lot, but
Yeah.
but I think it is a great opportunity. It's the benefit of our federal system, right? Is to have all this diversity as far as our laws are concerned. And so you have Colorado, you have Washington, Oregon, Alaska, others I think that are moving forward with it. And so the case, I believe, will continue to grow stronger as these states move forward. But there are things in the absence of changes at the state level that could be done here locally. I listened to the Packerverse, which is another podcast.
Okay.
A great podcast actually out of Milwaukee, and they talk a lot about the Packers. But they highlighted Dayton Jones, his arrest after the Packers lost to Seattle like a year and a half ago. They highlighted his arrest because his fine was so exorbitant in comparison to the laws in Milwaukee or Madison, for example. So he was charged with like an $890 fine for a very small amount of marijuana. And the argument is essentially, well, I mean, Dayton Jones, that's no problem for him, right?
Right.
But Dayton's not like every other person who might run into those kinds of issues. So, I mean, that's something that the city council could change tomorrow if they were interested in.
Well, they're
taking a
too
look at
busy
that.
working on banning single sale alcohol. So.
Yeah, they're going the other direction. But so that's interesting. So they can set the level of the fine. I mean,
Right. So in Milwaukee, it's like $50 or less, and it might be even lower in Madison.
Okay. I mean, and
So it's like de facto decriminalization.
right. Like if you can pay $50, yeah. Like, and that's it. I mean, it's $50, and like you get a misdemeanor.
A municipal violation, yeah.
Oh, so it's not even like a official misdemeanor?
I don't believe so. No.
Well, why the hell don't we do that?
I have to ask the city council.
Yeah. All right. We're gonna do that.
We need to do that. I have a question. So, in regards to the medical profession, how do they feel about this? Have they, in Wisconsin, have they had anything to say about this?
I think it's mixed. I haven't had the chance to talk to a lot of medical professionals about it, but I think that there's been a bias against this form of medicating, I would say, for quite some time. But opinions are shifting, and especially when you start talking about pain management and the problems we've experienced with opioids and opiates and heroin and everything else associated with that form of addiction. I think people that live in states that are allowed to use cannabis as medication, as pain management.
Well, I can tell you this.
Has been helpful.
Sorry, I cut you off again. Having an intense surgery recently and not being able to take any pain medicine because I cannot tolerate it.
Yeah.
I had a cousin who lived in Seattle that told me she would mail me some, chocolate.
I think that's a huge fine. That's
that
over
would-
the mail.
I said
Right.
no.
That would be a federal offense.
I said no, but then I thought to myself, you know what? I can't tolerate this pain medicine. So I had to go without anything. But why is that okay? Why I should have, a choice like other people in other parts of the country have?
Right. And that's where I think you have, 80% of the electorate sort of on your side in that same position saying, certainly for people in these circumstances, there's no reason why they shouldn't have access.
So, I guess I want to hear from the other side, the people who actually don't agree with that, because I can't find these people. The people who are like, no, we absolutely cannot legalize it in any fashion because of this reason.
Don't you think some of those people though are the people that actually, the drug companies that actually make the pain medicine? Hello,
Oh.
that's who that is.
For sure. But that's why when I just, I talk to reasonable people, like all people,
Those reasonable people don't pay politicians for their campaigns. They don't line their pockets.
I'm sure if you invited
I got
some of my Republican colleagues on, I'm sure they would talk with you about it.
Yeah. Well, especially somebody who has a little bit of a different viewpoint. I really do want to hear from them because I don't get it. I see the tax revenue. I see the fact that it happens anyway, and we're creating a criminal element that doesn't even really need to be there. It's less addictive than cigarettes and alcohol. I mean, and people that say these things out loud, they are branded as potheads and drug abusers. I don't use marijuana, but it should be legal. I also don't drink rat poison, but I think that I should be allowed to put that in my body as long as I'm not going to the public expecting them to pay for my medical bills.
I think there's got to be a lobbyist involved, though. There's going to be a lobbyist somewhere involved with this.
Well, I mean, I think that's obvious, right?
Right.
The pain medication people and everything, yeah. Which is interesting because like 2 weeks ago, I went to the doctor for migraines, and he, prescribed me some drugs, and they're amazing. But then now that we're saying this out loud, I'm like, well, maybe I could have done something else. Anyway, so anything else on that?
That actually could segue. We could go into prison reform and the amount of money, the very large amount of money we spend on the Department of Corrections at the state level.
Right.
You want to talk about that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I mean, that was actually something in my first interview when I ran in 2012. Sat down with the Chamber of Commerce, and one of their questions was, what is an issue that you feel like you could work on a bipartisan basis? And corrections reform was the one that I highlighted because, there are people at the national level like Grover Norquist from, Americans for Tax Reform, very conservative guy, and Ben Jealous, who was then, I think, president of the NAACP, who had come together and, advanced a set of principles, essentially, which was, we really need to take a close look at corrections at the federal and state levels and recognize that we're being dumb on crime. We're unnecessarily spending a lot of money and not rehabilitating individuals in a proper way. So, I had a lot more hope, honestly, when I came into office that was something that we'd be able to work on in a bipartisan way. And certain Republicans have, I think, talked about moving in that direction. But when the rubber meets the road, say on the Joint Finance Committee, when people are putting together the state budget, we haven't done a lot. We've done some, to put more state money into drug courts and mental health courts and alcohol courts and veterans courts, which is something that Brown County actually has been very progressive with and have advanced those sort of alternative courts in, I think, a really good way. But there's a lot more that we could do because, like I said, I mean, it's not a great way to expend resources, especially when you look at that sort of return on investment and recognize that what happens when folks go into our prisons in too many cases is that, they are not being rehabilitated. They are being, made, in some cases, better criminals than when they entered.
So the thing that was in the news yesterday was this rape case in California. And, I'm an easygoing guy. I keep, I don't have that many opinions, and I keep them mostly to myself. Not really true. However.
You do?
Yeah, all right. So, I couldn't help myself. Like post after post after post after post, all of these people are publicly shaming this guy. And I want to preface this with, he was proven to be criminal and he deserved some punishment, right? But the uproar was over, his dad stuck up for him, which, duh, right? I mean, any dad is going to do that. And also that he got 6 months instead of 6 years. And I asked what I thought was a pretty innocent question to open up some dialogue, and it just turned venomous. And I just said, so how long is enough? And nobody actually answered that other than saying that the statute was 6 months or 6 years instead of 6 months, which, okay, fair enough. If that's the minimum, whatever, we have to go with that. But I think that some of these minimums are what have caused some of this problem. We have this tough on crime mentality that in the big picture isn't serving anybody. We put, this kid did some things wrong and he deserves some punishment. Fair enough. But if we put him into a prison, there's a good chance he's going to come out as a career criminal. So, like, how do we serve the greater good?
Right. Yeah. That's reprehensible behavior on the part of this guy, and I don't think the punishment fits the crime. And I think the larger issue is that we have a real problem with misogyny and sexual violence, and we need to come to grips with that as a society. But as far as
meaning, we need to talk about it.
Yeah, we definitely need to talk about it.
Guidelines should be.
And as a dad, I have an obligation to talk about that with my kids, and I think all parents have an obligation to have those conversations with their children.
Did you see the letter that his dad? Did you read that?
I read all of it.
Oh my God!
I read all of it, and I'm not saying that 6 months is enough, but that it just made me think, well, how much is enough? Because that is top of my mind. The money.
I think his dad should be in there with him.
But see, that's the kind of problem that makes our prisons explode. We're putting people in because people are like, lock him up. I don't want to think about it. This guy's bad. Lock him up. So that's the racial element. That's the classism element. All these things, like, well, that guy's a bad guy. He's got nothing to contribute to society. Whatever the excuse is, and we have more people in prison than
maybe we should address it like some other countries do, and we should just castrate him and move on.
We have more people in prison than those places. There's only one country on earth that has a higher percentage of their population in prison. I don't even remember the name. It's a tiny little African island that has pirates. Like, the island is half full of pirates, literal pirates. So they put people in prison because they're pirates.
Well, and if we look at the numbers, though, if we look at the numbers for Wisconsin, this was in 2015. The state spent $2.3 billion with this Department of Corrections and $2.2 billion for the university system. That is a problem. That's a huge problem.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's a huge disconnect between what our priorities should be and what they actually are. The amount of money that we need to spend in order to house an individual in one of our state correctional facilities.
Well, so I never like comparisons like
year.
that, because you need to look at what the local, state, and federal spending is.
This is a state budget, though.
Yep.
And then,
but that's the thing. Like,
right.
The state has a mandate to be providing for certain things, and some things come federally, some things come locally. If you look at the entire expenditure, that's a more fair comparison, and I still think you're right, but I think that it's not fair to just pin that on the state. I think it's global.
Well, let's just say it's not a shock to anyone that we know we don't put the amount of money that we should into education in the state, or we used to, but we don't anymore.
So much like putting money into prisons doesn't make us safer, I don't think just dumping money in education makes us smarter.
But it actually might make the numbers of criminals go down. It's quite possible.
Maybe.
But I guess that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Thoughts on that?
It certainly increase by not putting money into higher education from the state perspective. It certainly increases the level of indebtedness that individuals have. There's a fairly direct connection between that over the last 20 years. Roughly 20 years ago, I think, the state of Wisconsin was supporting our university system, UWGB, to the tune of 40% of their budget. Now it's around 17%.
Wow.
So students have really picked up the lion's share.
Why is
that? Because of budget cuts over.
Well, see, I would argue it's because of the federal student loan program. It's free money. And students, they're young, and we're taking advantage of them and saying, it's free money. You get to pay for it when you get your big fancy job working at Starbucks,
right?
When you graduate.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense to require universities to have those conversations with students, to encourage parents to have those conversations with their kids about what path of study they're interested in pursuing, and understanding what a likely job is going to pay in that field. Talking about community colleges, UW colleges, and our technical system here in the state. All those things are positive. But the reality is people are far too indebted in this day and age as a result of student loans, and we need to grapple with that for economic reasons, I think, to free up some spending, right?
That's a whole nother podcast.
I know. So sorry. So looping back to the prison thing.
Yeah.
Are there any actual initiatives on the table to do something about that in our state?
Yeah. I think, like I mentioned, the alternative courts, drug and alcohol courts, veterans courts, those sorts of things have kind of bubbled up at the local level, at the county level. And we need to, at the state level, encourage more of that to take place.
So
'Cause
but there really isn't any push right now.
and there has been a limited push. I mean, advocates asked for, I think it was $75 million to go into these alternative courts last biennium, and the Joint Finance Committee put in around $3 million. So there's a lot of room to grow to essentially defer money from state corrections and put it into these alternatives, because in the grand scheme of things, that's going to save us money in the end.
So are we wrapping up already?
We are. I'm sad.
Man,
that went so
went
fast. Went way too fast.
Well, like you said, we could have talked for a half hour about education.
Well, once you guys get through, my 98 other colleagues, then I'll come back
98.
for round 2.
That's your rule? That's your stipulation?
Exactly.
Do you want us to hold you to that?
No, I'd be happy to come back whenever you extend the invite.
Oh, thanks for coming.
Yeah, a lot of great information. Thank you.
Yeah, we definitely talk for a million years about all that stuff, and everybody could listen to my idiot rants, right? So we're at episode number 11 of Political Radar. So if you want to check out some beautifully written show notes, you can go to politicalradar.com/11. You can go on to iTunes and anywhere else that you can get podcasts, which this podcast is everywhere. You can go on YouTube. You can go on to Google Play. You can go all these places, and you can get this wonderful, wonderful podcast and listen to it and give us feedback about who you'd like to have on and what you'd like to hear, and give us 5 stars, because then people can find it. And if you have anything you want to say to me, you can find me on Facebook, or you can find me at ELLIOT on Twitter, and you can find Rhonda.
Facebook and at Sitnicow on Twitter.
And where can people find you?
Facebook, Twitter, Google.
Okay.
All good places to
Do you have a
find me.
Twitter handle that people should look for?
Yeah, Rep Genrich is the Twitter handle. And on Facebook, the official page is just Eric Genrich. The political one is Eric Genrich for State Assembly.
And thank you again for helping us out here, Representative Genrich.
My pleasure. Thanks for having
a lot. If you enjoyed this episode of Political Radar, please share it with your friends on Facebook and Twitter. Even better, submit a show review to iTunes or Stitcher. To listen to other episodes of Political Radar, please visit politicalradar.com/episodes. To support our podcast, please visit our sponsors who make the show possible. You can do this by visiting politicalradar.com/sponsors.
Thanks for listening to Political Radar. To ensure that you never miss an episode, subscribe on iTunes or your favorite podcast app. To stay up to date, visit politicalradar.com or connect with us on Facebook or Twitter.
This episode of Political Radar is brought to you by ReleaseWire. ReleaseWire is a powerful media engagement service connecting businesses to journalists and bloggers. If you need to get the word out about your business, ReleaseWire is an effective and affordable way to reach journalists and bloggers who are truly interested. And we have a special offer for you today. Submit your first on-demand press release with ReleaseWire and save 25% by entering the discount code PoliticalRadar. That's PoliticalRadar. ReleaseWire, from release to results.
Political Radar is a proud member of the Newsmakers Podcast Network, an ever-growing network of podcasts covering a wide range of topics. Check them out at npcn.tv.